Let me go search for the link. Already have it. Let me share it. Probably a way to make this automatic, right? Like not search for the link each time and share it in Telegram. Probably can't do that. Not that it's a terrible job. Anyway, we're live now. The link is shared on the Telegram. Paul, do you want to start?
Sure. So to continue and try to finalize the PR and the implementation of the operations spec tests, especially focusing on the execution payloads. Right now, I managed to improve the runner after the updates from Thomas related to the selection of um, related to the addition of the mainnet specs. So now I'm managing to pass the right parameters, especially considering that we need to select the right config, especially for communicating with the NIF by passing the right config to the from SSD into SSD. So now it works correctly on that side. So I have correct serialization and deserialization, the snappy decompression functions too. Um, so so now I reduced the number of errors greatly. Um, I still have a few that are related to other matters, but at least it's a lot better. Now the two that I mainly have is mainly related to how to handle the tests, because the operations is a type of test, and in this type of test you have one test that is a little bit like standing out from the others, which is the one that I'm working on. Basically because you're supposed to communicate with the execution client, so we have a mock, but plus you also have some situations where you have, for example, no post data, because basically it's separated in mainly four files. I go quickly on that, but basically there's a pre-state, uh, there's a uh, there's a payload, which is the thing that you're supposed to execute on the pre-state, and then you have a post state, and the goal is to make sure that your internals function correctly by taking the pre-state, passing it in your internal function with the payload, making the modification on the state, updating the state, and then making sure that this updated state is equal to the updated state, to the post state that was given. And so to make sure that this functions, you need to make quite a few assertions and other things. But basically, I have two problems right now. One right now where some of the states that are updated are not equal to the post, and some where there's basically just no post. And so when there's no post, we're supposed to reject, like say that there's an error. But when you say that there's an error, it, instead of saying, like, considering that the test passes because we threw an error, it still considers that you threw an error, so it's bad, uh, which I need to verify why.
This,
um,
sorry to interrupt, but there's something important. In our design, we shouldn't throw errors if we have a problem, unless it's something completely unexpected. We should return an error tuple. Like if we should only throw errors if there's like, I don't know, invalid types. Like this function only works with integers and you're passing it as string, or this function only works with with, for instance, an SST type of binary, and you're passing it, I don't know, a beacon state or something like that. Um, if we have something like, hey, the I checked the BLS signature of this and it's invalid, we shouldn't throw a BLS signature invalid error or something like that, like we would do in Java or in other, like especially in object-oriented languages, but other languages as well. in here we should always, if possible, return an error tuple explaining the kind of error. Uh, and if that's the case, it should also make your job way easier in testing, because it's way easier to identify an error tuple than to catch an error that was thrown in order to make the test pass, which is like a harder task in itself.
Yeah. So to finalize, yeah, I agree with you. So I'll be working on that just to understand where it like doesn't function, and how can we improve that, especially on the test that should fail, and to see like what's the best way for us to manage the test that should fail. Uh, and then just verifying on why does our internal function not update correctly the state. um, right now what I'm seeing is that um, almost, if not all, the the fields are the same. The only field that is not similar most of the time, like that I've seen, is the withdrawals route, uh, where I believe that it's our way to serialize the withdrawals route that is potentially incorrect, because it's not returning the right binary, because the withdrawals is a empty is a empty list. I think in all, in most, if not all, the tests. And when we are serializing this empty list and creating the root for it, uh, the root that we have starts is a binary, and it starts with the number 40 when it's supposed to start with the number 121. um, and so yeah, I went through the motions, and I believe that I'm serializing the correct way that we discussed with Thomas Gruner yesterday. So potentially it would be a problem. It could be a problem with the serialization that we're doing with the withdrawals list, that could potentially incorrectly serialize it. So yeah, looking more into that before making an update. But at least it's progressing in the right direction, and we should have something working pretty soon.
Awesome, Paul. Yeah, looks like good progress. Not sure on the serialization part, but I fully trust you and your debugging skills. And if you have any suspicion of a bug in the serialization mechanism, which could be the case, like we could have an edge case for the empty lists, then that's probably something that Thomas will be way more aware of than I. So maybe, Thomas, you can make sure that we are serializing empty lists correctly. If Paul, you know that that's the case that we're not handling correctly. Like if we have an empty list of withdrawals and then that shouldn't cause any change in the root and it's causing a change in the root or something like that, then we should focus on making sure that it's a serialization problem and solve it. If not, well, we can try to isolate it further.
The root hashes depend on the max length of the list. Maybe
Mm,
maybe if you aren't using the right constant, it can result in different hashes.
that's a very interesting hypothesis, worth checking. Like if you're using, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, because I wasn't sure how it was built, so I tried to verify my constants too. And at least I believe I am using the right constant, which is max withdrawals per payload, which is normally 16. I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, then it would be great, which means that we found the error. If I'm not, then I'll dig deeper. If Thomas, you can potentially verify in the execution payload what is the max length of the withdrawals vector uh, or list, would be great. Just to double check that I didn't make an error.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a very good one. And let's also make sure that we are using the same config as the spec tests. As I think the config, one of the things it modifies is the length of the vectors. So yeah, like even if you're using the right constant, if you're using the wrong config, I think that could modify the value of the constant, ironically. Let's make sure that we are handling that correctly. Well, anyway, great progress. Like this is a very good debugging process. Sorry. Yeah, let's continue with that. Thank you for the updates, Paul. Tomas, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Yesterday I was working on requesting blocks from peers. Finally got it to work. Turned out I had some problems with headers on the payload. I wasn't taking into account the 4-byte field that's the for context. Well, with that, I managed to request blocks. For now, it just grabs some random peer and requests a single block, also at random. The next step would be to integrate that with a beacon state storage or some kind of metadata storage. I was also working on that to allow us to look at gaps in our database, in our block database, and take that into account in the blocks we ask our peers for.
Yeah, that makes sense. We should definitely keep track of that in a persistent way. I would even go as further as to say that we don't care that much about memory versions of things if we need to store them persistently. If we, like, for instance, this kind of stuff, knowing if we requested or not a specific block is something that we should have in persistence, in storage, right? So if we are already going to need that in storage, let's start with that, and then we can move to, hey, can we cache this in memory? But I wouldn't go the memory to storage way first. I would just think of it the other way around, start with storage, and then eventually if we need to cache that, which we would probably will at some point, then we can start thinking about what structures we will use for memory.
Yeah, I modified the beacon state. I also modified the beacon state storage from using an agent and storing it in memory into a similar way to the block store we had that stores it in the database.
Perfect.
I was thinking maybe we should like store use a single database for each table we have. I'm not really sure how LevelDB works underneath in the sense of storing multiple things in multiple different keys, different objects in the same database. Um, I think we have to discuss that, but we can leave it for
Sure.
later. Um,
Why don't you add an issue for that in GitHub, and then we can
Yeah.
do like a small time box research on that. Like for instance, next week you can spend 1 or 2 days looking at how LevelDB works in that sense. So we can have these non-blocking, and then we can focus on how does LevelDB handle in performance, having different databases and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I would go for the simplest first, and then we can adapt. Like go for the easiest.
Yeah, for
Do
now,
you know what's the
having it
easiest?
all
Because
in the
maybe you do.
database is
Yeah. Perfect. Like I wouldn't try to prematurely optimize this before we know if that's a problem, especially considering that we might not use LevelDB as our final key value store. Like this is the one that we are using now, but we might as well move to BoldDB tomorrow, and maybe BoldDB has different optimizations. So I would go with the easiest way to handle this for now, and then we can optimize. Does that sound okay for you?
Yeah, sure. I found that the API it has allows for iterators, and I thought that will be quite useful for looking into gaps in the blocks we have in our database.
Yeah.
But it's a bit complicated when you have everything in a single database because it iterates in the order of the keys, and if you add a prefix, it kind of muddles up things.
Let's actually have a separate conversation of that.
Yeah.
Let's discuss that in detail after the daily, shall we?
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
that sounds like a non-trivial thing, more than like separating in databases or not. Like from what you're saying, this is not a performance issue. This is more of a non-trivial design issue. Is that
Yeah.
right? Okay. Yeah. Let's defer the discussion to after the meeting, and then we can continue.
Well, for today, I was gonna work on that, on trying to design this simple algorithm. It's just a linear scan in the block storage and looking for gaps, and use that information to request the blocks from peers. Uh, Also work on the way we request blocks. For now, we are just requesting one block at a time for because of the serialization um, problems. I we still have to work on that on decoding multiple responses from peers. It's a bit hard to separate that because of the way the snappy decompression is. Uh, well, both the snappy decompression and the SSIT libraries work. Uh, but yeah, that's what I'll be working on today.
All right. So it seems that we have a couple of blockers before we can request a range of blocks. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, let's talk about those then. We should probably allocate some of our time for that. Maybe I'll take one of those issues on my hands now that I'm slightly freer than last week. All right, anything else?
nothing.
Thank you very much. That's great progress. So of me, I've been working on the Nix file. I was working on top of what I forgot the actual name, but the user Asin Cash was working on the Nix file. He made a lot of great progress, and I worked on top of his PR to make sure that everything worked. I made a couple of adjustments so that it worked with the correct version of of Erlang, so that the protobuf files could be compiled correctly, and it works perfectly now. But I also found a potential issue with ASDF. Like actually not as ASDF, but I saw some complaints or on people having trouble with ASDF, and I think that I found a possible cause with that, and the cause is probably not having made the per console installation for ASDF. So I published that in Telegram, but I should probably add that to the README as well. Like, hey, this is a common problem. If you have ASDF and your installation is not finding Go or is not finding Elixir or whatever, it's probably that you're using ZSH or Oh My ZSH or whatever console different from Bash, and you probably didn't make like the extra steps that are required to be able to use it with that one. So yeah, we probably have a working installation for both ASDF and Nix now. Let me think if we have anything else. Yep, that's all the updates for me. I read that there were multiple questions regarding the bootcamp, which is understandable. I think that Fede jumped in and commented on that today. So basically, we finished reviewing everything a couple of days ago, but I sent it for approval. As it's something related to money, it gets a couple of days to be approved because yeah, you got to pay people, man, and that basically causes you to you need at least a layer of management to make sure that everything is right and the list is okay. So we're getting that reviewed and we'll be sending results as soon as possible. Sorry for the delay on that, but we should have some results in the next following days as soon as we get the approval for that. And then next week we can start with a couple of interviews just to make sure that we get to know everybody that was selected. And afterwards we can actually finally start the bootcamp. So thank you all for your patience. That the bootcamp is going to be great. We're already preparing some stuff for it. I'm already looking forward to it. Hope you're as well. And yeah, I think that's all my updates. I don't know if we have any final comments or questions.
Yeah, it works. Um, yeah, just updated the code. Actually, indeed, the last thing that I had missing was the withdrawals route that were different on the two beacon states, on the modified one and on the post one, which was throwing. Uh, there's just no match on the right hand side. Now they actually match, which is cool. But also, I think it also shows that we should create these a full we should create a file to put all the constants. So I'll potentially open an issue to create like a utils files where we have all the constants also on the Elixir side. I believe that we have them on the Rust side, but not on the Elixir side, which can bring to confusions like that. So I think that would be great, especially because it's actually a pretty um, like you really need to think about it to think about, oh, there's potentially like differences in like the constants in both minimal and mainnet. So I think it will render the life of the people easier when they especially the newcomers or when they start implementing the tests. So yeah, right now I just have to handle the tests that are supposed to fail, and also the tests that have no post state. Right now they're failing because we're basically asserting beacon state against uh, empty value. So obviously they are not equal, but in the specs they say that if there's no post state, it's basically because the update wasn't successful, and you should mark that, and so you should also throw an error when there's no post state, because just the transition the state transition wasn't possible. So yeah. So mainly, I think the last problem that I have to face, because I think these two things are the same, is basically the handling of failing tests. That should be positive. So going to work on that now, and hoping to PR soon to continue going forward.
Awesome, Paul. That's a great update. That's probably the most efficient daily that we have in the last couple of weeks. Solve the bug right live. Congratulations, guys. And yeah, I fully agree that we should have one file per, what's it called? Per constant set, per configuration. We should have one file for mainnet, one file for minimal, etc. And for each of those files, we should then probably manage like a dynamic dispatch or something. We can discuss the strategy further on, but we definitely should have one place where all the constants are. And if we don't have that, then we will encounter problems very fast. So yeah, fully agree with that. Yeah. What else do we have? Yeah, nothing else. Congratulations on that. I think that there were no comments on the live, so we can finish the daily for today. Yeah, thank you all for coming, and see you all tomorrow.